Stupidity is not a competition. Unless you're a politician. The Daily Mojo.
That's perfect timing right there, Ron. Hey, Phil. How are you?
How's it going?
How was your coffee?
It was good. It was good. Got my trusty Penn Central mug right here. Since the country's going down and this company went down, you know what? It all makes sense, right?
Right. The whole thing with Biden and in his speeches, and his speeches the past 2 or 3 days have been just bizarre anyway. Did you see that one in Hanoi when he was in the middle of answering a question and then some voice comes on the loudspeaker and goes, "Okay, that's it. That's all we have." And he's still trying to answer the question.
I didn't see it, but I heard about it, and I heard that at some point he was going to go to bed too. That was another. He said that.
It's just
here's the
bizarre.
thing. I don't think he's actually senile. I think he's really good at putting on an act, and he used that act very effectively in 2020 and convinced people, well, he's just a nice old man, and he's going to be the opposite of Trump, and we're not going to have to worry. He'll be okay. But if you notice, he has never missed an opportunity to impose his will, and that should scare everybody.
That's a good point, too. And I'll see you that point and raise you where did I put it? It was Barack Obama mentioning the fact that if he could have a third term and just be sitting in his basement in his sweats, do you remember him saying that? And telling people what to say? It's really creepy how these things are aligning. Obviously that can just be blown off as, it was just him yammering. It's nothing. But after a while, some of these coincidences, you have to stop writing them off as simply coincidences and start realizing that these people actually have a plan, and it's a nefarious plan. And so far, it seems to be working, which is why we have to keep pushing back even harder.
Yeah, I agree. And, I was just actually talking to one of my coworkers at Freedomworks about this yesterday. The thing about Joe Biden and a lot of the people, especially the Democrats and a fair number of the Republicans too of that era, is that they didn't necessarily have principles. Now, you had people like Ronald Reagan who absolutely believed in what they were doing. I believe that Tip O'Neill, even though I don't agree with him, believed in what he was doing. But people like Joe Biden, they were just there. Bill Clinton, also a big believer. The only principle he had was how many women could he chase at once. But when it came to public policy, they didn't care. So that's why Clinton he ran on a let's regulate and tax everything agenda. Then he saw that Newt and all Republicans won in 94, so he switched. Joe Biden, whoever remembers him saying anything coherent, but every step of the way, he's gone along with what he believes the public or his party base will do. Now they want to regulate things to death. Now Barack Obama is driving the bus from behind the scenes. He's happy to go along with it. He doesn't care as long as he gets to be in charge.
I was going to say, and as long as he's making money behind the scenes, I think you're right. He doesn't, stealing money behind the scenes. He doesn't care. As long as he's raking in millions and millions of dollars, I think he would sell his mother. He's certainly willing to sell his son. For profit if he has to.
And, and it's, I don't know what the full story of Beau Biden was. I suspect that, if he's anything like Hunter and certainly related to Joe, he may very well have been involved in some of the nefarious activity too. But, if he were around, he would be enmeshed in it as well. And the fact that Joe isn't willing to even get Hunter out of the spotlight and say, listen, you know what, take the drugs and the hookers and go underground in Ukraine or Russia or wherever the heck, but he'll continue to have him around. That shows you what he's done. And let's think about this. If he, involved in all of this, why would you put your son, one of the only two people that is closest to you after your first wife died, why would you put him in harm's way in order to accomplish these things? Unless you yourself believe that the money and you are more important than anything else.
Right. And it would be very easy at any point along this timeline of Biden's to throw Hunter under the bus as just a drug-addled, He's confused. I thought he was smart. He's just his addictions got the best of him, and we hope that he learns a few lessons in jail, or in the psych ward, or wherever he ends up. Which I think Joe Biden is evil enough to do that, and say that but I loved him, and all I want is the best for him, and if prison is where he needs to be to help him see. To stay clean and see the error of his ways, then, so be it, because we love him. I can see that one playing out in a heartbeat. Down in New Mexico, and the whole public health, what'd she call it, a public health crisis?
Right.
You remember a couple of years ago, the CDC, they were starting to float things like gun violence was going to be the next public health crisis, the Rona. Is that where you're going with this? Because I started thinking about that, and it's like, whoa, this is the rest of the script playing out.
Well, even earlier, remember in the early 2000s, there were a lot of reports of doctors starting to ask people if they had guns in the home, or having the children to say, if they took them to a pediatrician, well, does mommy and daddy keep guns in the home? And they tried to say, oh, well, it's related to public health. And of course, it certainly wasn't. That was the beginning. And then as time went on, you started to hear, oh, well, this is a crisis. It was a crisis. Everything became a crisis, especially after 9/11. That was the big word to use. And we said, just as the whole COVID foolishness was getting started, they're going to use this as a way to go after other rights. Most of the time we talked about, say, well, climate change is a public health crisis, but we also predicted guns as well. And look at what happened. Michelle Lujan Grisham, and we'll call her gun-grabbing Grisham, has said in the city of Albuquerque and the county surrounding it for 30 days, but only 30 days, suspending your two-way rights. And what's even worse is she said that, hey, guess what? My oath to uphold the Constitution is not absolute. Now think about that for a second. Not only has she said the Constitution doesn't matter for at least 30 days, but, oh, by the way, my dedication, my promise to uphold it, well, that's not absolute. So maybe there's times when I don't absolutely have to do that.
Isn't that what Biden said about the Second Amendment, that no amendment is absolute? Boy, they're starting to trend on all of these things. They're starting to repeat each other.
Now, the sad part is that goes way back to, the early days of the Republic, because if you really ask yourself, where does the Supreme Court actually have, or the courts in general have the ability to interpret the Constitution? They don't. They took that power and everybody went along with it. But there's nothing that says, okay, if you have any disputes about what it says in this document, go ask the courts. It doesn't. So ever since that time, we got into the habit of here or there, very, very small at first, but much bigger later on, deciding that we can interpret what the Constitution says. It says what it says. It's written down there. If it doesn't say you can abridge rights for 30 days, you can't abridge rights for 30 days or any day at all. That's why they're called rights. And this makes me think about one other thing. The Constitution is a contract. The left loves to talk about the social contract because it obligates you to follow something they want you to do or not do. But what rights do we have in a contract if someone breaks it? Can we pull out? We're not going to participate anymore if you won't do? Because if I don't pay the electric company and follow my end of the contract, they cut the service off.
Right.
So, can we decide we're out, we're good?
It doesn't seem like it, no.
Oh, well,
my question is this about what they're doing. And because this is, ever since she said it, this has been bothering me. Is this their trial balloon for the country?
Oh, absolutely. No. COVID was a trial balloon. And trial balloon floated very, very high. Look at how many people, even conservatives, were willing to accept that their freedoms, our rights were taken, I shouldn't say freedoms, our rights were taken away because of a so-called emergency, which wasn't even an emergency. We're taken away.
Right.
And we accepted it. We went along with it. It was okay. And think about what it took to get it to go away. We had to basically harass a bunch of flight attendants, most of whom were not very nice anyway. And yes, I did say that. And, go ahead, rain, fire, and brimstone on me. Put me on the no-fly list. They did that. And it took a judge, one judge, who finally said, yeah, you know what, you can't do that, after more than a year plus of that. So that showed, yeah, no, that was fine. Gun violence, so-called gun violence, and the next thing, climate change. Now what happens when they say you can only drive your car under certain circumstances because of the public health crisis?
See, that's what they're doing in England with the cameras that they have been having some trouble with. People in England, the cameras were taking shots of the license plates and deciding from those license plates if it was not an electric vehicle, therefore it was spewing too many carbon credits or whatever, and it had to be restricted or get a ticket. Which, to their credit, the people in England started taking down the cameras. But it's almost like they're floating these little tests around the globe just to see how far they can push we the people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and they know there are so many people, and and this is the human condition, unfortunately, who will simply accept what the strongest voice is willing to do. That's why it's a miracle that we were able to keep this republic the way we have for so long. Because for so long, not only was the government largely restrained in its actions, even a lot of the overreach, it was still restrained. But the people also, didn't have anything to just say, okay, well, gee, I guess I have to go along with this and agree. But it really started, I would say, in the 70s and the 80s. You started to see more and more regulation here, regulation there. We didn't know it at first. We were the frog in the water as it was starting to heat up. And then after Barack Obama, things really just took a turbocharged sprint. And that's where we are now.
I tell you, it makes you dizzy when you start to think about it. There is where is the, hang on a second. It's over at the Federalist. I don't know if you saw the piece written by Sean Davis yesterday, and it asks, was 9/11 the beginning of the beginning of the end of the American empire? Because of the Patriot Act, because of their ability now to spy on the U.S. government ability to spy on their own citizens, all of that stuff. And all of that's been rolling around in my head now for some time. And it really does seem like that's when everything pivoted. Everything in this country especially pivoted.
Look at it. We talked about a couple of weeks ago, my, episode at the Milwaukee airport. Why were we willing to accept sexual molestation in order to get on an airplane? And by the way, before that, why are we willing to accept, regardless of who the president is, that they steal, because I consider taxation to be theft, but they steal so much money from us and pay these people in the CIA, the FBI, and the military, and yes, all three of those need to take a hit here, but yet they could not manage to figure out who these terrorists were and what they were up to. They couldn't keep track of them. They can track what I look at on the internet all the time, but they couldn't keep track of people who they knew were doing something that could potentially hurt others. And they say, well, you know what? You have to go through this, that, or the other because, well, there might be terrorism out there. There might be terrorism. What's your job? My job is to raise money and communicate this message. Their job is to keep us safe, and they won't do it. And we accept it day after day after day. That is what we have to stop doing, because the minute we stop doing it, the minute we become ungovernable is the minute when they look back and say, okay, you know what? We've gone too far. We got to get back in our box, our constitutional box. And that's what our goal has to be as Americans.
And one final question before we part. The New York Post ran this story yesterday afternoon. Inside the forgotten third World Trade building occupied by CIA that burned down 9/11. They're talking about World Trade Center 7.
Yeah.
That has been surrounded in much controversy as of late, the past, 5-6 years, ever since the University of Alaska Fairbanks came out with their study that was funded by the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, but came out and said, look, there's no way that building fell because of debris that landed on it from the North Tower. It just, that's not possible. and it was built over a Con Ed power station, so it required extra support, etc. And this is now in a mainstream publication like the New York Post, questioning whether or not this thing was imploded on 9/11. I mean, is that a major shift, especially in the mainstream media, to even acknowledge that that's a possibility?
It absolutely is, because you've had this discussion going on from some quarters for a very long time, and it was always met with, oh, well, you're a truther, you're a truther, you're a truther. You know, even you think about President Trump at the time, Donald Trump, he talked about how it didn't make sense that the towers themselves collapsed because of the way they were built, that didn't make sense, even with all the fuel and everything that was said. As you talked about in your last segment, there is so much that we haven't been told, so much that has been kept from us, and that military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned us about has metastasized year after year after year, and its number one goal is to keep the people in the dark and only paying taxes. And think about the Matrix. Everybody likes to talk about the Matrix. How are we any different from the Matrix now? We are in those pods providing energy, or in this case money, for them to do what they want to do. That's it. There's very little freedom here. So we have to take it back.
It's really, I mean, it's enough to make you dizzy. It really, when you stop and think about it. So, all right, how do people get involved with Freedomworks? Why should they be doing that?
Number one, go to freedomworks.org, and I'll make a promise. If you do, I will be certainly less angry most days, less angry. But go to freedomworks.org, sign up to be a member of the Freedom Teams, get in touch with other patriots, and that way you can start to play your part, because that's the only way it will turn around.
The First Amendment lives here. Watch and listen at thedailymojo.com.